I'm Audun Ytterdal. I'm head of operations for the Schibsted newspapers, originally from VG. I'm the co-author of Munin, an old school graph system. I'm a unicycler, used to be a C64 hacker back in the 80s. I have a master's in computer forensics, and also dyslexic. And I wrote these slides over a period of time, so if you see any spelling mistakes, that's probably why. Oh, so. Yes, I'm going to tell you about, I just have some, most of these talks today has been very technical, and about how you can protect yourself. This is more about what happens when you have been attacked, and how those types of attacks have been up through the years. VG, I guess most of you know it, is Norway's largest site. We've been online since 1995. We're also the Varnish Cache project origin. We have approximately 2.5 million unique users per day, usually hit about 20 to 30K hits each evening, and peaks around 100,000 hits per second. In normal traffic, it's about 6 gigabytes, and peaks around 20, and transfer about 1 petabyte of data sent per month. That does not include video, which adds another 3 petabytes and goes between 13 gigabytes and up to peaks at 500 gigabytes per second. Like the main peaks have been things like Therese Johaug live conference, and also the Stockholm truck terrorist attacks. What I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about some reference points is NSA. I'm going to talk about Google Street View, .NET fuckers, Ugnazi, some blogs, pink blogs, what we call in Norway, how here represented by Sophie Elise, black metal band Mayhem, Anonymous, and Leonard Ritchie. So, our problems might not be very similar to your problems necessarily. Security is very different from company to company. We are a media company. If we are defaced, we can write about it the day after and get more hits. We also have problems like festivals, like music festivals. Like our main problems isn't handling the amount of traffic I mentioned earlier. It's handling slow traffic, especially in the summer when people are on lousy 3G, usually on music festivals, and having like long-lasting connections when everybody trying to read the latest news from an outer island somewhere in the southern, the tropical south of Norway. We've done things like turning ICMP ping off per period. That actually ended up in several sites thinking they were down. For some people in Norway, like the first thing they do to check if the internet is up is ping vg.no. And I know for a fact that like the Helse Sørøst had like checking the internet was up was actually checking VG. So when we didn't answer ping, like Helse Sørøst was down. We have journalists which needs to be able to work even from like a borrowed laptop in a network cafe in Baghdad. So we can't really kind of be very strict about what kind of equipment people are going to use on our sites. We could have, like, we also have problems having like web application firewalls, like mod security and other types of WAFs, because we are trying to increase our SEO, and there are people like Gabrielle Union, which means that you will trigger all the WAF that are looking for union, like select from the SQL selections. New code deployment and a deployment speed of new code is a part of the product. For example, when the tsunami hit in Thailand, we had a new application which was searching for your relatives and making sure you were ready, similar to what Facebook has now. We had that within 2 hours from the tsunami hit. And that means that people just have to have an ID, throw some code together, and just put it online, which is also a bit problematic for me as an operations guy. Which also means that we sort of have to just make, we have exploitable code out probably every single day. So we have to kind of focus on how we get up again and what happens if we are hacked in some sort of way. But you also have cases like we had the WikiLeaks database, which was actually like we were targeted by foreign governments, which also meant that, so the way we tried to secure that by just having it on we bought a new laptop, installed Linux on it, had some extra, made some special custom-made kernel modules that just destroyed the possibility to load new modules. First removing all the modules and then destroying the module interface. And then kind of using a screwdriver to kill all the ports and then use a large chain around the desk and lock the room. And our main challenge is that we are, even though we are we have some paid products, we do, a lot of our income is coming from ads, and ads are scary. VG is attacked every day. The actual targeted ones are a few in between, but the automatic ones and also the ones that a new exploit comes to Metasploit, 14-year-old kid wants to test it on the first site he knows of. What's the first site he knows of? VG. So whenever there's a new exploit, we just see people trying it. Not necessarily because they mean evil, but just they thought it was easy or a good idea. Low-level attacks, UDP and TCP is usually handled by blocking that at the ISP level, and the TCP is usually handled by F5s. We can handle about 40 gigabits HTTP traffic if we need it. We can handle about 500,000 hits per second if needed with normal traffic. HTTP attacks is usually handled in Varnish because they are usually so custom that we need to just fix them when they arrive. We get a lot of blackmail attacks, meaning that someone says that we are going to DDoS you unless you pay up. I guess a lot of other people have got similar things as well. But we don't pay. We just try to handle the traffic somehow. We also see a problem of using kind of well-known software. Like WordPress is just an example here. WordPress is actually pretty secure. It's probably one of the most read over source codes in history. So it's probably much more secure than our own code. But whenever there is somebody actually finds an exploit in a software type in WordPress, it's a matter of minutes before there will be an attack against sites like VG. So for all practical purposes, it's actually better to run your own custom code because then someone actually has to mean it to attack us. But mostly we DDoS ourselves. Usually either by news or by code. I'm going to some of you might have seen these slides earlier, so I'm going to take a lot of the older stories first. We've been online since 1995, so there's a few to take from. We used to have a travel blog. It was Asian code, even like PHP 4. It had a reflected cross-site scripting attack. which was not very. It needed to kind of it needed the user string to be specially crafted. The problem, and usually that didn't hit our end users at all, because you actually had to search in Google for a very, very long and strange string, and the only thing it did was just redirect you to another site. But these sites referred then again to malware sites. The problem with it was, even though VG worked and very few of our users could get infected, one thing was the security firm used this as their 15 minutes in the limelight, meaning that we have sort of handled the PR part of it. But the problem was that these people posted these URLs in massive amounts of forums, which meant that Google eventually picks it up, and then it marks VG as a site that links to malware sites. And then we block our actual users because they get the pop-up saying that this is actually an insecure site. So even though the attack itself isn't so problematic, the effect of it meant that people were confronted with the VG contains malware. And the problem, if you first are marked by Google, which is sort of the Borg of support requests, like you can't really talk to Google. So we had to cash in a favor with them, because we were the first non-technical site in the world, as far as I know, which implemented IPv6. And we that was an experiment together with Google. So we managed to have some tentacles into the Google organization and made them sort of whitelist us very quickly again after we fixed it. And because we had some non-related issues with some storage, NRK and friends wanted to come on site to film the ongoing hacker attack. So while I was trying to debug this, there was like a film crew in the reception of VG, like trying to get in. And I got a call and say, yeah, hello, head of operations. And the guy answers, now you're live on radio. Please explain what's happening on VG. So I was sitting there trying to debug this stuff, and then trying to be a part of a radio show at the same time was not an ideal situation. We had some success in, if you can see these are pretty old screenshots by the client here, that we tried to sort of have a positive outlook of when things go wrong, we try to be open about it. When we take things down, we try to make some fun about it, at least. So at this point, we actually knew that we were going down, and we had one of the designers make like an error page, which just made a fake versions of VG, and where we have like a special box in the middle telling us what's actually wrong, and how we're working about it. I would have like some fun pictures around it. And Twitter sort of got back to us and saying this is actually more fun to look at the error page of VG than watching the news from other sites. Yes. Next is from 2011. This is an actual image on the front page of E24, which is one of the daughter companies of VG. There were an issue with the font editing tool. The developers and an external company were asked to implement LDAP as an authentication model. And I guess most of you know LDAP, but there's two ways to authenticate against LDAP. Either username password to authenticate, or just do a search, which is called anonymous bind. Thing is that a lot of libraries out there, kind of, if you don't send a username and or a password, just blank both, it will think that's a success, anonymous bind to do a search, and it will return success. Which means that if you were logging in with a empty password, an empty username and empty password, you actually get into the system. So one guy actually managed to do this and took a picture of himself with a mobile phone with geolocation. of the bathroom of his mother. So we called his mom and told him to stop. Next story is from 2012. A competitor at that point, like these are moving, newspapers are moving all around, but at that point, Aller Media was one of several receivers of a large DDoS attacks from a group called the .NET Fuckers. They did, among other things, run, Aller Media was running blog.no, digi.no, dinside.no, and blog.no was the largest blogging platform in the Nordics. They have been down for at least an hour each day for several consecutive weeks. And they called us and asked, are you having problems with DDoS attacks? And we looked into our systems, and yeah, we did. We just didn't really notice it. We agreed to help them, so we just rerouted their traffic through our i5 load balancers and our varnishes, and kept them up and running while we were trying to help out figure what the cause was. These .NET fuckers used Twitter to brag about their problems. And this was a collective, collective work with a lot of other companies as well, but we got in contact with some of them, one by one. And one of them told us they used a tool called Nightlight to do this. And somebody else told us that he was the guy that made the tool individually. And we found this tool on SourceForge. Then we tracing the usernames and stuff like that. We ended up in Microsoft OneDrive and found again a photo taken with a mobile phone of a screenshot of a high-scored board, of a World of Warcraft high-scored board, with nicks linking to each other. And we got another live drive with, so by looking at the photo, we were able to kind of pinpoint the location of one of them. On the other drive, we saw a picture of a town. It looked like the southern, tropical southern town. So my wife had a look at it, which is also working here at the university with the computer forensics. And we managed to see from this image, there was like a large image taken from a porch down to a typical Sørlandsby. We managed to see the reflection of a logo of a plumber van in a shop window. And so then we just looked at the area where that plumber operated. So we kind of narrowed down the area. Where does this plumber operate? And then we used Google Street View to find the place that had the same angle as the image that was taken from the photo, and then just turned 180 degrees and had an address. So we delivered all of these to the Norwegian police, and together with the runner of the pink blogs at blog.no, which is actually Kjetil Mannheim, which is the original drummer of Mayhem, surprising enough. The Norwegians were caught, and I think they were the first one that had been jailed, based on based on our data, among others. And also was probably the reason why the FBI was able to take down Ugnazi a while later. Next story, Anonymous. I guess most of you are well aware of DLD, datalagringsdirektivet. At some point, a journalist called Fridtjof Jacobsen at VG had a commentary in favor of DLD. That didn't sit well with a lot of people, especially me included. And especially the anonymous people were going mental. They used the low orbital ion cannon, among other things, and we suddenly had a massive DDoS within Norway, which is problematic. This was the first time we were not able to handle this at all. There was just kind of, there was way too much traffic. We couldn't really, like, usually we use tools like rerouting through Cloudflare from external users, just routing, like locking us down to only Norway and stuff like this. But this was coming from within Norway, and it was legitimate traffic. So we were sort of bailed and said, we can't really fix this. So we resolved it by just logging into the RSC channel and said, you win. And we talked to them, and just kind of, even though Anonymous is just sort of a collective of people just doing stuff, they even sort of have leaders, people that are more technical than others. And we talked to them and said that that's pretty cool. How did they manage to get us down? We do actually agree with you, but this is sort of a political standpoint. Like, this shouldn't be a really problem. So we managed to win them over. And I said, fine, we'll stop. Even though, and that meant that most of them stopped, even though the random kid from different schools was still doing stuff. And that worked pretty well until a journalist managed to tweet this. Because this was us telling, like, we managed to fix it. So then we were down again for at least 2 more hours, until we managed again to convince them that this journalist was not necessarily, like, he was not allowed to be on Twitter for a while. But we mostly DDoS ourselves. What do you think happened here? Well, it's really like actually delivering out VG+. VG+ was just like a sort of a iPad tool where we actually downloaded today's edition. But of course, you'll think like everybody should get today's edition at the same time. That's not a good idea. The other main problem is thundering herd. Is anyone familiar with the problem thundering herd? There's one person familiar with thundering herd. Okay. This is probably one of our, like the problem that should be known by the people that like doing high traffic sites the most. Say that you have anything that is in any way like has an interval of something, like you are reloading a page or an Ajax request that kind of pulls something at some interval. Say that you pull something every 10 seconds. And a very good example of this would be, for example, VG Live, which is like a sports site. It really needs to kind of have a lot of Ajax pulls that pulls different parts of the updates, parts of the news feed. Let's say that you have 10,000 users, and then you have thousands users per 10 seconds. Things are seemingly good. You get about 100 hits per second. But then real world is applied. Like you have stop the world things, or you have network latency, or like Node.js, and then things tend to sort of like it's called thundering herd because like if you have like a flock of bisons or any animal running one direction, they will sort of eventually start running at the same beat. And it means like they're starting like scrambling, and then everybody will end up like hitting the feet at the ground at the same time. And eventually this can start cracking the ground. That's why it's called thundering herd. And that means that like you eventually, no matter what you do, at least as long as you don't do stuff, you will end up with people like gathered in groups towards like they will be grouped together. So you still have 1,000 users per 10 seconds, but now you have like 0 hits for 9 seconds, and then you have 1,000 hits per second the last second. And then you're starting having arrows, and then you have like queuing up people, you have retries, and then you end up having 2 million hits per second. And you can't really get up again, which means that you have to randomize all the things. You have to randomize. You don't query something every 10 seconds. You query something between 9 and 11 seconds. You don't retry every 2 seconds. You retry every 1 to 6 seconds. If you have you have to cache arrow pages, even 500 arrow pages. Just make sure that you control it, that you don't actually leak out a stack trace or something. You have to have something in front that detects that this is a 500. Just create a new 500 page and deliver it to the end user. Varnish is your friend for this. Scott here mentioned New Relic. They actually managed to DDoS us. Because New Relic is a script that you put on your page that sort of does a lot of instrumentation and then reports back to their sites in S3 buckets. But they have some strange things in their code. So if S3 was down, they will send this traffic to the origin site instead. So S3 was down, and then all our users were sending all their metrics to us instead. And they really didn't have, and since we didn't receive it correctly, they tried to resend it as fast as possible. So because S3 was down and we had New Relic on our page, New Relic took us down. And also, if you're doing intervals, you have to be able to control it. So instead of saying that your client should send you every 10 seconds, the client should request every 9 to 10, 11 seconds, and when they retrieve the object, it also gets a new interval, like being 15 seconds or 20 seconds because you have to back off. But you really, at this point, you really shouldn't be doing, if this is a kind of a live site, you probably shouldn't be doing Ajax pulling at all. You should probably using server-side events instead. I guess a lot of people have been using WebSockets, but WebSockets doesn't really work in the real world if you're gonna cater for all normal users and strange firewalls. But server-side events works, which is a sort of a one-way WebSocket. And we open source a version of that, which we use for all our real-time stuff. There was also mention of serverless content security policy here earlier. We do that, but it's really hard because we have so much ads, which does strange things, so we can't really do it, but we do it to report. And especially if you're moving from HTTP to HTTPS, which you should be doing, that can help you sort of report on what you need to be doing to be able to do that. And we actually implemented all this serverless using Amazon Lambda and other cool things, but it ended up being way too expensive and too much time. So we just re-implemented it Varnish and just Varnish caching posts and sending to an Nginx and logging this to a normal access log and then just using log rotate every minute. So from an extremely advanced solution, using Redis and Lambda and RDS and all kinds of Amazon tools to just doing it in one server. Next story I'm going to talk about is newer. It's malicious ads in the last autumn. We got increased mails to our support about fake antivirus stuff on our site. Looked like this. Your mobile phone is infected with this virus. This happens. We get these all the time. It's usually on Android because someone, or on a desktop, because someone has kind of been trojaned and their router or their machine has been overridden by some stuff. But there was 2 red flags. First of all, it was mostly reported from iOS, which is, in my perspective at least, a bit more secure than the Android things. And also it was actually in our app, which was much more scarier. We still only got about 2 or 3 reports a day, but it was strange. We started looking into it. We got kind of different variations of it to this, and the problem was they were taking over the whole page. We have our ads are in iframes, and they're still able to break out of it and able to take over the pages. And it got a bit worse. Like we got a lot of report from the actual the journalists at VG. They got them themselves, and we actually started getting porn ads. And I had to ask the strangest work-related question I've ever asked: is what kind of porn? Because I had because we were not able to replicate this at all. So we just had to pull up the people that got this and figure what is sort of is the things to see here. What we did, we started the incident handling at Schibsted framework, which is sort of our just way of how do we handle incidents. We contacted NSM. They told us that we looked into it and so there was more people than us that was involved. We started creating a live doc, which is sort of just a Google document where everybody is able to write in all their theories, all their how we progress, who does what. We went through. We thought this might have something to do with ads, so we disabled all. We have two types of ads, sort of like the large vendors that spend buckets load of money, and we have the programmatic ads, which sort of is the you and me can just write down and like have an ad for just about anything. So we disabled all the programmatic ads. That didn't help. We disabled all programmatic. We went through all code, all S3 buckets, all servers, all NPM modules, PHP modules, Java modules, just about anything. We hot patched the safe iframes and sandboxing violations headers, which should have been there in the first place, but our ads providers didn't really enable us to do that earlier. And whatever, nothing happened. We still just got, we had to do a lot of debugging and wait a day or two to see if we got another report. So it was really irritating to wait to debug this. So it ended up that we actually wrote an article in VG that, can you help us? Crowdsourcing, helping us out with finding this out. And then we started collecting all the incoming data into a G Drive spreadsheet and see what kind of data we were able to pull from these sets. So we had even some journalists digging into data, and I figured out that many of the people reporting about being in transit. So and a lot of them are actually mentioning Majorstua and the subway in Majorstua. So we actually, at some point, we thought there was like a cell tower being rerouted to do something really funky. Yes, but at some point we figured out that 8 out of 10 were women, which is strange because usually it's the people reporting these types of problems usually men, at least 7 to 8% of men. But it was at least 8 men, if not all of them. And then we started looking into ads again, because we found one ad that was specifically targeting women. And but we couldn't really figure anything out. We looked through them, did all kinds of stuff to be able to do to get anything useful out of them. This was a company called AdVLAN. They wanted to buy VG. They were contacting this was not programmatic ads. They went into us and said that we will pay $20,000 to because they were going to launch there's a clothing brand in England called Net-A-Porter, and they wanted to release in Norway. So we started digging into this, but eventually, doing a lot of debugging, we figured out that they had a few exploits in their what they actually were doing. They asked specifically to have an endpoint that they could, so they were delivering ads. This ad point. First of all, we selected that we were only sending women there, because that was sort of our algorithm saying, if you're women over this age, you'll get this type of ads. What they did on their side, they had a script that actually measured the time it took for you to request their payload. And if you spent more than X amount of time, they will actually give you the bad payload instead. So they were actually checking if you're on a bad internet line. So what they were doing, they were kind of hiding. They were saying only targeting women on bad internet lines. and then descended down the rabbit hole. And the only way we managed to eventually do this is using like iPhone emulators and like network emulators that were simulating network loss. So we notified NSM and others about these things. And this is sort of the different payloads we got. Digging into this, what we should have seen, it was a pretty good page. Like we looked into Adveland, the people that was like the ad company delivering the ads for the English clothing brand. But looking at afterwards, so like all of the links were dead on that page. And the address of the company was a residential area in Ireland. And the salesperson, Leon Ritchie, does not seem to exist. So we were starting to get, you should better our background checks. And adding my conspiracy hat, we started like going back in this trail, and a lot of these things were running on King servers and links to a guy called Vladimir Fomenko. He's the only person that is knownly connected to hacking the US election. So the tinfoil hat area here is, what if this was just a probe? What if this was actually people like trying to see what happens? Because we are sort of, they didn't hack VG, they were sort of just, they were trying to hack the end users, or at least seeing what they can do. Can they send them different ads? Can they interfere with us in any way? So I'll just leave that and taking off my conspiracy hat again. I mentioned IMAS, which is Incident Management at Schibsted. This is sort of what we live by when something happens. If you see something, you are no matter who you are the incident commander. And then you report into a war room and get help from there. You create a Slack or IRC channel or whatever your choice. And move all comms, no matter where you talk about your product or what things, you move all the comms into that channel. And then you start building a live document based on a template, which will help you sort of figure out how we're going to handle this case. And then ongoing, you try to fix the problem, and you might optionally assign an operational lead and a communication lead for this incident, and keep your stakeholders in the loop. If this happens to be a personal data breach, it might be different, and you have to escalate to a DPO or CTO, because in the times of GDPR, this needs to be handled pretty quickly. And then you continue that. And when it's over, you write an incident report, usually just kind of improve on the live doc, and move those into postmortems. An example, if I'm able to. Oops. Can I? No, I can't. I'll show the live document afterwards. Well, I'll try to do it. No, they haven't finished yet. I think they were finished by 2025. This is a sort of, oops, this is not on your page. I have to drag it. So this is sort of just a template. Summary, replace with text, a brief summary of the crisis at hand. What communication channel you have, which incident commander you have, the communication lead, if it's anyone else than the incident commander, who can come in and help, what's the status now, the current theory scratch pad, the to-do list, what's been done, the timeline of what's been happening, and then you have an included post-mortem afterwards. This is just documentation, but it's probably one of the best things we have when we handle incidents at Schibsted. Going back here. So, what have we learned? No, I'm kidding. This is going to be... I think I spent my time, so I think I'm going to say thank you. If there's room for any questions before we end. Yes. The document, like, I guess so. Like you can have. Well, like, yeah, why not? Like everything else we made is open source mostly. So like Varnish Cache is open source from day one. Moonin, which I make, is open source. The SSE hub is open source. So we have sort of lived by that from day one. I'll try to open source the framework as well. Any other questions? Yes, like we hired one, Einar Otto Stangvik, if anyone knows him. Used to be in my team. Well, he was hired before because we wanted him to do a pen test for us. So we have both external and internal pen testers. He was external, or we just asked him to do pen testing and then just hired him afterwards. And then he was an operation guy in my team until he ended up being a journalist. But you're asking about sort of the white hat / grey hat people sending us mail saying we found this on your site. We have had a few of those. I don't personally have any problem with it at all, as long as they haven't broken anything badly. We don't currently have any sort of a bug bounty on VG. We probably should have, but we thank people and make sure that make sure that they are happy. That was a bad answer, but it very much depends on how they approach us. Other questions? I'm going to stay for the evening. Ask me about smart home stuff. Ask me about my microservices rant. And I need colleagues. So if anyone wants to work with us, just come and talk to me over a beer afterwards. Thank you.
Just hold it for a second. We're just going to end with the last bit here.